Today we're filming for the Hamilton College Jazz Archive in Sarasota, Florida. My name is Monk Rowe, and it is a thrill for me to have Plas Johnson with us today, saxophonist extraordinaire. I think I can use that word. Have you ever stopped to try to figure out how many recordings you've been on?
No.
It'd be hard, wouldn't it?
Be very difficult.
Because you've been a leader and a studio man and big bands. How did all that get started?
Rock and roll. Rock and roll in the 50s.
Yeah.
I played on a lot of the rhythm and blues labels when I first came to LA in 55, 54, 55. And that music was, taken over by the rock and rollers.
Yeah.
And I guess they were pop artists trying to duplicate this music that was so hot with, I guess, the white teenage blind public at the time.
When you got to LA and you maybe, how do you get your first date when you get to a big city, you're unknown?
You don't, unless you're playing with somebody who's going to make a recording. I played around town, My brother and I got into LA around 1954. And, we have a band. He's a piano player, and I'm a sax player, so all we had to do was find a drummer.
Yeah.
and if it's a real good gig, we had a bass player.
Yeah. Could afford a fourth.
Right.
Yeah.
And, we starved around for quite a few months before getting onto something. And I met and played with Johnny Otis. Johnny Otis had his going rhythm and blues review going at the time, and I played with him for a while. And I started getting calls for some rhythm and blues dates. I'm trying to remember the labels now, Modern, Aladdin, and these artists are like, well, actually one of the artists that recorded on these labels was Charles Brown, who I first went on the road with when I was 19 years old, out of New Orleans. It was my bus ticket out of New Orleans with the Charles Brown Band. So you get to know people, in the town. When you get to a new town, you go around, you try to make all the jam sessions, and people hear you play, and usually people like my playing when I played. And Johnny Otis did some records out of Capitol. And I got heard at Capitol by Dave Cavanaugh, who was a producer and A&R man out there. And he got me on fabulous recordings with Nat Cole and Frank Sinatra and Peggy Lee and Ella Mae Morris. And I forget all the people out in the corner. Capitol was a hot label at the time.
Yeah, he did some good work with Nancy Wilson. And
yeah, well, that was later.
Yeah. Were you from a musical family?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My father played banjo in the early days and saxophone later. And he was a senior, I'm a junior. And my mother, whose name was Grace, she was an entertainer, played piano, and sang. And she had a fantastic talent. Never read music or anything, but she had real good talent. And could play anything that she heard. And my sisters sang, my brother sang and played the piano. So we got into music quite early, and in fact we were, I guess, 4, 5, and 6 or something like that.
Yeah.
And, we used to do 3-part harmony to the popular tunes of the time.
good ear training.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you start out on the tenor sax, or?
No, I started out on soprano.
Oh.
Because my father just came home from a pawn shop one day and he brought a soprano home, and that he had picked up quite cheaply. And I started playing that when I was 12, and we had an alto later, maybe, I don't know, a year later, something like that. And I don't think I got my tenor until I was about 15.
What kind of music was popular on the radio when you were forming your musical?
In New Orleans, it was Dixieland music and blues music, great blues music. I say blues music, it included artists like Dinah Washington. You know, she sang blues, but, you know, she was just a great singer. And I heard Louis Jordan and, well, all the blues artists, T-Bone Walker, B.B. King. My father was a Ellington fan, so we had some Ellington records. And he was also a Johnny Hodges fan. He was an alto player, so his great thrill in life would have been to play like Johnny Hodges, which of course he couldn't do. He never tried.
Not many people could. Yeah, he had a sound. How about saxophone players that caught your attention in the beginning?
In the beginning, the blues players. Louis Jordan, hard swinging blues player. Later on, in the middle 40s, I guess, I heard some of the bebop players, or players that were on the bebop label, like Don Byas. And let's see, Gene Ammons was popular on the radio too. So it was a kind of a combination of all kinds of music, and you know, DJs in those days, some of them got to select what they wanted to play, instead of maybe like today where a program director does that, and
right.
A DJ just makes conversation between the takes a lot of times. I think very few DJs now get to select their own programming.
Yeah. Jimmy Witherspoon was talking about that earlier, about how important the DJs were. Each city had its own kind of personality.
Yeah, right, so they played what they like, and if a DJ, he would get a following by what he played. You know, if the people like what he played, well, then they would tune into his program.
And a lot of them were playing black music that the white teenagers started to like. Is that correct?
Sure. The blues artists, like Charles Brown, Amos Milburn, Roy Milton, some of the singing groups, Clyde McFadden, and the Drifters. They had an upbeat type of gospel, gospel quartet.
Right.
And they were quite popular in the black community also.
Yeah. When you got to L.A., then you started playing on rhythm and blues, and was it rock and roll yet? Was it called rock and roll yet?
Well, I didn't start playing in rhythm and blues. I played anywhere I could get a job.
Yeah.
I actually, one of my first jobs really was a jazz job, kind of a jazz job in the city of Long Beach, with a drummer called George Jenkins, who was Dinah Washington's first husband, and played with Lionel Hampton, and he was a great drummer. Me, George, Wesley Prince, and my brother on piano. We played in a joint out in Long Beach, which was kind of a sailor town with bars and music 6 nights a week. And stayed there. I only stayed there for about 6 months. So that was our first big job where we had a steady job.
Yeah.
Before that, we were doing jam sessions for $3, $5 $5.
I guess they call that scuffling, huh?
Scuffling.
Paying your dues, all those things. It's almost like you have to do it, I guess. I'm going to test your memory now. And can you tell me some of the first solos that you did on some of these recordings that went on to sell some records?
Oh, no, there was many, but I don't know. I don't have any idea which was first. There was a period where the white artists were kind of covering these rhythm and blues records that were coming out, and if they made any kind of radio noise and you could tell it was going to be a hit, well, they would cover it maybe with their own artists and superior distribution and everything, and just take the hit away.
Like Pat Boone?
Yeah, Pat Boone doing Fast Domino thing. Well, that's taking the hit, one step higher, because I'm sure he probably sold many more records on that. And young Ricky Nelson, I played on his stuff, and he did some Fast Domino stuff too. I'm Walking.
Yeah, that's right. When you would do these things, the recording at that time, were they done in parts, or did everybody play together?
Oh yeah, they were done like mono.
Yeah.
Mono track. Stereo hadn't come out yet.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody who was going to be on a record was in the studio.
What a novel idea.
What a novel idea, right? How to make a record.
Did you know ahead of time what you were getting into when you got to a particular date?
No, most time we didn't.
Yeah. You just go and listen to the tune, basically, and find your part. Did the producers often have an idea of what they wanted you to do?
Yeah, usually. Either the producer or the artist.
Mm-hmm.
I could, like we play behind artists, say like Bobby Day or Larry Williams, who did Boney Maroney.
Oh, yeah.
And Bobby Day did Rockin' Robin and what else? Little Bitty Pretty One. Yeah,
Could
Little
be,
Bitty Pretty
yeah.
One.
Mm-hmm.
And artists like that, they had they had a whole concept of what they wanted the band to do, and we did it. They would sing riffs and stuff to us and show us how the song go and everything.
Yeah.
And it usually came together in 3 hours.
Was there a time when you were driving in your car? Did you have a car?
Yeah, I had a car.
Okay. Was there a time when you were
You don't
driving?
survive in L.A. without a car. Not
That you were driving and that song came on the radio that you heard yourself for the first time?
Oh yeah, that's always a thrill. Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Turn that up.
Yeah. And I hadn't. My brother and I had recorded in New Orleans, but we did our own thing, and I think I played behind a couple of artists down there too.
Mm-hmm.
But hadn't gotten into any serious recording for a living until I got to L.A. and had been there about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about studio work for film.
Well, I had no plans of becoming a studio player. It just kind of happened. The blues part of my playing got me on a lot of record dates. And my playing wasn't all blues. I could play a pretty good ballad and follow changes and stuff like that. I had a pretty good sound. And I think one of the first arrangers to use me in that capacity, other than the blues stuff, was Les Baxter. And maybe Van Alexander, Billy May, Nelson Riddle. I was being discovered by arrangers who they used me in strictly in a solo capacity. Many times I'd go to a date and just just played a solo, and then somebody else played the charts. And it was kind of fun times.
Mm-hmm. Every day something different.
Yeah, it kind of just, from 56 on, it kind of just mushroomed, and I was quite busy between 56 and 62 or 3, up until the time maybe when the Beatles music came in. So, and pop music changed entirely. But I was still busy because I did TV and movie stuff.
What was the big band experience? Did that fit? Where did that fit in with, as far as your career in? Was it in the '60s that?
Mostly in the studios,
Yeah.
because I hadn't had any big band experience outside the studios at that time, and so the big band writers like Shorty Rogers, Henry Mancini, Van Alexander, Billy May. Ernie Freeman did some big band stuff, and he was also on some of the rock and roll stuff. So actually, he's really a classic writer, very good arranging stuff. But we played in a jazz trio also for about a year, where he played Hammond organ.
Mm-hmm. Has the, I don't want to say legal end of it, has the financial end of it changed for studio musicians at all from the late 50s until now? For instance, if you play on a tune and it sells a lot of records,
you have no rights outside of union scale unless
Okay.
you make some kind of artist deal.
Which is unlikely.
Unlikely if you get called
Yeah.
as a side man.
Right. Oh.
Very unlikely. And unless you're the author of the tune, of the music.
Right. Well, you happen to play on a couple things where you could be one of the most heard saxophonists around. Tell us about how Henry Mancini started to use you on.
Well, I had worked at Universal, and I had played on. Henry Mancini was kind of a junior writer out there at the time, and so I played on several things with him before that. I'd also played on his Peter Gunn, and I had recorded Peter Gunn. Can't think of the trumpet player's name now, but I had recorded Peter Gunn on another record, and it turned out to be a million seller. And this was.
I didn't know that
this
was you and Peter Gunn.
Instead of Henry Mancini's recording.
Oh.
I'll think of the trumpet player's name in a minute. But so we had crossed paths before, and Henry had the talent of matching the player with the tune. He would call just the right saxophone player for what he was writing, or just the right harmonica player. Or, he knew players quite well, and he knew his music. He had a knack for putting stuff together that matched, and I guess that's how I came to work on this Pink Panther.
Mm-hmm. It's a classic, I think you could say. Certainly had a sound to it. Do you have any idea at the time that it was going to become such one of those tunes that everybody can whistle?
No, of course not. But we did have an idea at the time that it was a great piece of music, because it was like 8 o'clock on a cold winter morning, and I forget how. There's a full orchestra with strings and everything, and after the tune was recorded, after the performance of the tune, the orchestra applauded.
A good premonition.
So they liked it.
Yeah. I have had students that just had to play that, They really want to get that sax lick down the way you did it. It's kind of hard. Tell me about the Rod Stewart thing, how that came about.
I was just called. I've read recently that with the event of multi-track, and
Yeah.
we got to with the event of multi-track, producers many times would call several soloists to play the same solo, and so I've found out recently that that may not be my solo on Rod Stewart's
Really?
record. A saxophonist by the name of Jerry Jumerville also was called in, and Jerry's not a student of mine, but he's been a fan of mine for years, and we talk mouthpieces. And,
Yeah.
and he likes my style, and so actually when I heard the solo, I really thought it was me, but I don't think so, because I've
Okay.
seen now on Jerry's record, he played it, so it just might be his song.
Well, if it's not you, it's somebody trying to be you.
Well, exactly. But I was called and I did play.
Yeah.
So who knows what comes out on the record,
That's
and
right.
that happens many times.
Yeah. Or sometimes it could be half you.
Well,
and half-
that's another thing that happens where you play a 12-bar solo and you might have 4 bars from track 7 and the last 2 bars from track 15 and somewhere in the middle from another track, and it can be done electronically so that it sounds like one solo.
Yeah.
In fact, I've had it done to my own solo, and I liked it.
I guess if the producer's got good taste and good
Yeah.
ears,
Exactly.
Yeah. What's been your involvement in any jazz education things? You mentioned you were working on a book.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been working on a book for 10 years.
Yeah, well, it better be good when it comes out.
I'm still pulling it out the computer page at a time. But
Yeah.
I got a deadline now. I think I'll finally have it all out of the computer this month. And then there's a struggle now to get it published. You
Sure.
asked me to send you a copy, so I will.
Yeah.
See what
We'll
you
give it a
think
try,
about it.
yeah.
In fact, I'll show you some of it today.
Good.
I have some pages with me.
Yeah.
But it's been kind of a fun thing. I started teaching in an improv class, about 5 or 6 years ago. And it was really my first experience with teaching, with trying to impart to players what I do, because I had no other teaching experience. And I guess why I was there was to play for them and to kind of tell them what I do. And that's a whole different way of thinking, because most players don't think about what they do, they just do it.
Yeah. It's hard to talk about it.
Yeah. Like I've had a student say, when I say student, I don't mean kids, I mean players who already developed, because I don't teach scales and stuff like that.
Right.
And I said, well, what do you do with your mouth, when you hit so and so? And I got to think about it. I got to play it over again. And they went, yeah. I said, well, yeah, the mouthpiece should be a little further up on your tongue. So to get
Right. Right.
that. It's a revelation to me,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not what the book is. The book is about licks. I'm self-taught, and when I think back over it, my first experience with playing when I didn't know how to play or what to play was listening to other players play and copying what they play or trying to mimic what they play. And it does turn out to be licks. Take like a study of blues playing. It's like licks. You can't say, well, it's just 3 chord changes. No,
Mm-hmm.
you know better. It's licks, little 2-bar, 1-bar, 4-bar phrases that you can intertwine in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a practicing player, then you get to try out things that you think work. And if not, then you should practice them. You should collect them and practice them. And the more licks you have in your pockets, there's major 9th licks, major 7 licks, 2-5 licks, 2-5-1 licks, 3-6, 3-6-2-5 licks.
Kind of,
yeah. And actually, these are little melodies that fits over those chord changes. And you know, when young players are coming up to play, and they know their harmony, and they've learned their instrument and everything. Well, the next step is like, how do you apply it? You know, so you see the chord change. I say, well, I have the chord changes, but you know, what do you play? What do you play when you see such and such a chord changes? And knowing the licks that fit over these chord changes will help you put some kind of a solo together. And the next alternative is to take the tune and listen to a developed player, what he does on that tune, and study it and learn it, so note for note. And when I talk to players like Ricky, you know, Ricky's a player that came up the same way. We were talking about that last night, where you just you study players. When you're learning to play, you study players who you want to sound like and who you think, you know, swings pretty good. And your style is how you interpret, you know, what you pick up from various players and how you put it together.
Usually there's 1 or 2 people that usually will speak to you, I think.
Yeah.
You know.
But the more the merrier, because there's a lot of great players. You know, you got my biggest complaint about young players is that they exclude so many of the great players of the past. And you're playing tenor saxophone, you should Ben Webster or Illinois Jacquet, Lester Young, Don Byas, Gene Ammons. None of these players should be excluded from your listening habits.
Yeah. You were part of the Juggernaut?
Yeah, I was with the first band.
Yeah.
Richie Kimuka was on the other tenor. And most of the same players that he has right now. Marshall Royal on first alto. Buster Cooper, Benny Powell. That was a fun band.
It's a good lineup.
Yeah. And, you know, the music is eternal.
Yeah. Did you ever have occasion to play behind Joe Williams and some of the other singers?
Yeah, I went to France with Joe Williams, I forget how long ago, 4 or 5 years ago, where he took a small group, 2 horns, and rhythm section to do a festival in southern France. I've played with Joe many times, but not for no long periods of time or anything like that, just by being on the same venue.
What's in the future for you right now? You have
well, I think
projects?
I want to play more. I want to get out of the studio, but I still love to do studio work, and I still get called for certain kinds of work, like maybe what I first started getting called for, that is blues solos, rocking stuff from the 40s, sometimes just beautiful music. I just did a couple of Latin albums with a young producer, Latin music, and kind of four horns, 2-3 Latin rhythms and a rhythm section. And that was fun.
And this evening you're playing in the Pres conference?
Oh,
no, you're playing with Jay tonight.
I'm playing with Jay.
Right. And what's it like playing with a violin with Claude?
Oh, I love him. He plays great blues.
Yeah.
Actually, he plays good jazz. And we played together before. Well, we didn't play together before. I met him in L.A. in I took him around to a couple of clubs, you know, to sit in. So that was the first time I'd heard him. I didn't know anything about him. But he's remarkable.
Yeah.
How old is he?
He is 91, I think.
I didn't know. I don't
think
know.
he's pretty old.
I don't remember.
I can look. Yeah.
Well,
And he is, he's a great guy, and
yeah.
he knows a lot of history, obviously.
Oh, you've interviewed him?
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, he was Basie's first guitar player.
Oh, yeah.
And,
He must have great recall, too, because
Yeah.
I've talked with him.
yeah,
He knows a lot.
yeah.
A lot of jazz history.
Well, Jay gave you quite a compliment while you were in the other room. He
Oh,
said Plas can play anything. He said anything you throw at him.
Well, I don't know. I've had my ups and downs.
Are you able to be with the studio work? Be choosy if you want to be?
Well, you're always able to be choosy. The other question is, can you make a living being choosy?
Yeah, yeah.
Not very much.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be quite in demand, and in demand for maybe some kind of music that's popular.
Mm-hmm.
But no, you more or less have to be, you know, available. And I was trying to play all the doubles, like the clarinet and the bass clarinet and the bass flute and the piccolo and the alto flute, and I have them all. But no, you have to more or less, to make a good living in the studio. You have to make an effort to play anything that comes along.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to play more live. I like, doing things like we did last night.
Yeah. Do you have
I like to play schools.
Yeah.
Bring some big band shots along. And teach the sax section how to play it. And I don't do much of that, but I'd like to do more of that.
Mm-hmm.
Get a good collection of some big band charts that I like to play. And
Do you have a core of folks in LA you like to work with on a club date if you can?
yeah, I had a 4-piece group that I worked with for a couple of years. In fact, they're on my album, Hot Blue and Saxy.
Mm-hmm.
Cedric Lawson was a piano player, used to play with Miles. Richard Reed, bass player. Richard Simon, sometimes bass player. Wonderful bass player, they both are. And on drums, I had my old buddy from the 50s jazz in the clubs, Johnny Kirkwood. He's been around. He plays.
Mm-hmm.
He can play a good shuffle in the backbeat, and plays pretty good jazz too.
Yeah.
But he's my age, You get a different take from the younger players. I have some young drummers that I like too. But it's interesting, and you don't really get into that much unless you work a lot around town, which I don't do anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I hope that your gig with Jay is a hoot.
It'll be fun. There's always a few surprises, but it'll be fun.
I know. These festivals are kind of interesting because the music is almost always superlative,
Yeah,
But every once in a while you see people looking at like, what are we supposed to do here?
Is this train going to derail before the last chorus or what? Yeah.
But it's been so wonderful to be able to just stand backstage and watch you gentlemen as each person arrives, and some of you haven't seen each other in years, and I just really like watching that. There seems to be such a fraternity.
Well, yeah, that's the nice thing about these kind of things because, you know, as a saxophone player myself, I'm not likely to run into the other saxophone players that I know and like, unless it's a festival or one of these kind of things that brings many musicians and many bands together.
Right.
So that part of it is very rewarding. So I want to do more of these.
Yeah. All right. Well, on behalf of Hamilton College, I want to thank you for joining us and have a good gig.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.